Hello, hello. We are back for another episode of Debate Prep Live. Now, Debate Prep Live is all about how to prepare for. Let me know if I'm getting an unstable connection warning. So let me know in the comments if it's screwing up too much. I hope I'm doing okay. All right, that's looking a little bit better. So, what we're doing in Debate Prep Live is we're taking topics that commonly occur in competitive debate, or maybe that you might actually already be facing, and we do a prep session, a strategy session for it. The topic for this episode is abolishing the Electoral College, but we're doing the negative constructive. Okay, so if you find yourself in a debate about abolishing the Electoral College and you have to oppose the idea of abolishing the Electoral College, then this is the video for you. What that means, though, is that you should already have some arguments that have been presented to you, or you're anticipating certain arguments coming out in the debate that you want to prepare for. Okay, so in this case, though, we're going to be using actual arguments that people have made in competitive debates, and we're going to be using technology to help us, along with my experience and my expertise, into develop strategies and to respond to the idea of abolishing the Electoral College. So keep that in mind. This is about keeping the Electoral College, about not abolishing it. That's what this whole episode is going to be about. So maybe the next 30, 45 minutes, that's what we're going to be talking about. Okay. All right. So I have very much embraced ChatGPT as a tool for brainstorming, but I want to warn anybody that's using it as well that it is not necessarily it's not a research tool. It doesn't help you with sources. And in fact, it will make up sources a lot at this stage in its development. So be very, very careful, everybody, about using ChatGPT to cite sources. Once it tells you a source for information, you should go and double check that that source actually exists, because ChatGPT is notorious for making stuff up. But let's get started, okay? So let's say that you are in a debate. You're like, especially if you're in an asynchronous debate, you already have an argument that somebody made about abolishing the Electoral College, why it should be abolished. So one of the first things to do is let's just see what ChatGPT does as a response to this. So I'm going to do uh, I have a script here. So I'm highlighting an argument that they're making right here. So I'm copying that and take a look. I'm just to say refute this argument for abolishing the Electoral College. Now, this is the big state argument. Okay, there's also a small state argument, but what I'm pointing out here is there's a time signature there. This one basically says that states like California, which has the most Electoral College votes, have an unfair advantage because they can outweigh a bunch of smaller states, which tend to be red. All right. So that's the breakdown of it. But all I'm saying is refute this argument. Now, I want you to be really, I'm going to be walking you through this, so be very careful. Here we go. We entered into ChatGPT what this is. Now I'm using 3.5. There is a 4.0. 4.0 tends to go a little slower, but it is more accurate. And I have a limited number of requests and posts that I could do for that. And I'm sorry, but I need to use that for something else. Here we go. So let's take a look here. The argument for abolishing the Electoral College is based on the misunderstanding of its purpose and function. Electoral College is designed to ensure that every state, regardless of size, has a voice in the electoral president. Okay, that's not a direct refutation. Furthermore, the assertion that some states have more power than others is inaccurate. Each state is allocated a number of electors based on its population, with smaller states having a proportionally greater representation. See that? So now, when people say big states have too much power, this is direct refutation. The thing that I have highlighted right there that you might not be able to read says, furthermore, the assertion that some states have more power than others is inaccurate. Each state is allocated a number of electors based on its population, with smaller states having a proportionally greater representation. That means that a voter in a smaller state has actually more influence in the Electoral College than a voter in a larger state. This is a direct refutation to what the original arguer was saying. It's the next one. It's important to note that the Electoral College is not obligated to vote for the candidate. That's like the faithless elector one. That one doesn't necessarily directly respond to the argument about big states. So notice that out of the three paragraphs, or the three, they're not even paragraphs, they're short paragraphs, I guess. Only one of the three I would suggest actually using in your speech as refutation. You can use the others for other purposes, but not as direct refutation to the argument that larger states have too much power. Finally, the argument that abolishing the Electoral College would increase voter turnout is unfounded. This argument that I put in there did not say anything. Okay, they do say it says that people in large states might not feel inclined to vote and participate. So this one does kind of directly respond to it. In fact, there is no evidence to suggest that direct popular vote systems result in higher vote turnout. Moreover, increasing voter turnout is a separate issue that can be addressed through other means. That's interesting that you can, that opens up the door for things like counterplans, which we are definitely going to get into in a second. And then it has a conclusion. Okay, so out of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like separate paragraphs, I would only say that the second and fourth are only the ones that directly respond to it. So even though ChatGPT can churn out ideas like mad, you have to really think about which ones are actually fulfilling the goal of what you're trying to achieve. Otherwise, it's really, really obvious that you're using AI to generate your ideas. Not only that, but you have to revise these things. You can't just leave it in this first form. This is your first draft. And now first drafts are so much easier than they have ever been. It should not be hard for you to generate a second draft, okay? So even with the refutation, I would say be very careful about using ChatGPT. It's going to give you more information than you need, and it's not always going to be relevant information to what you're trying to achieve in that particular thing. So you want to make sure that your opponent has a consistent narrative too, right? If they say large states have too much power, and in this case, the person who did this debate also said that small states have too much power. And so you're like, so which one is it, right? Later on, they say, here, I'm copying this next one. Okay, so if you say my fourth argument is that it gets disproportional power to small states. It's stated small states have less votes, meaning they have less power. I think that if we fix the small states would have equal, ideally, each day. Oh, okay. So I think they may have not understood quite. So let's see what ChatGPT says regardless. Okay. Yeah, so no, they weren't contradicting themselves, but some people do. Make sure that there's no internal contradictions. You don't need. You could put in the entire script if you wanted to, and have ChatGPT refute it, and that's fine. But notice how this isn't. This is just kind of like saying, "Oh, your argument about large states is wrong." It's not necessarily an argument about like why we shouldn't abolish the Electoral College as a whole. It's just that one argument is wrong, and maybe that's a reason why we shouldn't. But in general, this is just like responding to arguments one at a time, which I think ChatGPT does an excellent job. In fact, it gives you more information that you need, some information that isn't as relevant, right? It's not outdated or unfair. It's a constitutional system that has been in place for 2 centuries and has worked effectively to elect presidents who represent. So that's feeding you really good language to use, but that's not research. All right, those aren't facts. Those are ways of expressing an opinion, a valid opinion. Like I'm going to say that right up front. It is a valid opinion, but it is an opinion nonetheless. Like saying what is fair and unfair is inherently opinionated. Okay, and so what's not happening right now is like it works effectively to elect presidents. It's like, well, there's plenty of room for disagreement about that. Just because ChatGPT said that it effectively elects presidents doesn't mean that's true. But if you are on the negative, then that is good language to use because it is consistent with the side that you've been assigned. If you personally believe that, that's also good language for you to use to express what you feel. If you might not have had that language at your disposal. Okay. Um, the system ensures can see look like that they must campaign in a diverse range of states. That's a good argument, but it's not necessarily directly responding to the small states argument. Now, so some people say um, so they didn't make this argument. Uh, how would you refute the argument that small states have too much power in the Electoral College? All right. So now I'm directly the argument that is best supported by evidence is that smaller states have disproportional amount of voting. Like the people in Wyoming, there's like 500,000 people in the entire state. They get 3 electoral votes. That if you divide that amongst the voters, that is more than people in larger states like California. So this one says, I'm sorry, it skipped. Okay. Um, not supported by fact. In fact, the opposite is true. Each state is allocated a number of electors based on population. So the allocated a number of electors based on population seems to be the rallying cry. All right. And so talking about proportionality is something that you could jump up and down on if you are defending the Electoral College. But look at this. Look, ChatGPT doesn't see this as a contradiction at all. It says the argument that small states have too much power in the Electoral College is not supported by facts. In fact, the opposite is true. Each state is allocated a number of electors based on populations, with smaller states having proportionally more power than larger states. Yeah, that's what I'm asking about. Like, and you're like, that's not true. They have more power. It's not true that they have more power. They have more power. Like, come on, ChatGPT. Like, it is not a cure-all for what you need in debate. You got to be looking out for this stuff. That is inherently contradictory. Like on face, uh, small states having too much power is not true. They have too. They have more power. Yeah, that's the point that I'm trying to respond to, and you're not helping me. Um, every state, regardless of size, has without the elect. Here you go. Without the Electoral College, candidates would only need to campaign in the most populous states and ignore the smaller states. Well, they would only need to campaign in the most populous regions because states wouldn't matter. Like those would be meaningless borders now, right? In a popular vote. So I would change that to regions. Furthermore, asserting small states have too much power is not supported by the outcomes of past presidential elections. That's better. That's much better. In many cases, the candidate who won the popular vote did not win the Electoral College. This means small states did not necessarily have an undue influence. That doesn't make sense to me. All right. So ChatGPT is struggling with this one, everybody. Okay, you got to be I think, and you got to be on top of it. You got to know about the topic. You can't just accept what it's saying. So, again, it is not a replacement for research. Okay, you have to get an understanding of the facts because ChatGPT will spit out answers regardless of whether or not they're true. All right, so this is dangerous. This is dangerous. Um, okay, so. Let's do a disadvantage, okay? Right? Uh, imagine you are in a debate on the topic abolish the electoral college. You are the neg, right? A disadvantage. All right, I'm even gonna tell it what type. I'm gonna do some politics. Okay. So now Politics DAs disadvantages, DA disadvantage. Politics DA is really, really, really popular in competitive debate, and I'm going to be laying it out for you. Okay, here's the negative. Write a politics disad. Make sure to include the uniqueness. So what I'm doing is I'm giving it the organization. I want 4 specific subpoints, and I'm telling it what I want: uniqueness, link, internal link, and impacts. All right. So those are the 4 subpoints. And so notice like the prompts that I'm writing have enough detail that it kind of really reins in what ChatGPT is going to spit out for you. So let's take a look. So politics. What does politics mean? Politics is the argument that there's going to be political backlash to the proposed plan. That political backlash is going to be bad, if not worse, than the outcomes of the plan itself. So here we go. Look at this. Uniqueness. The current political climate in the United States is highly polarized. Perfect. So uniqueness is about the current status of politics. And right now, things are really, really polarized. I really suggest that you go out and find evidence for this. Don't just let ChatGPT assert, because we just saw how ChatGPT asserted things that were inherently contradictory. We didn't even need to research it because we saw that it has no problem spitting out contradictory information and pretending like it's not. Okay, so make sure that you have to validate these things. ChatGPT is a great way to brainstorm ideas. It is a piss poor research tool. Okay, all right. Electoral College helps to mitigate some of these divisions by ensuring the candidates must campaign in a broad range of states and appeal to. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. We're going to take a look at when we get down to impacts, and we might kind of reverse engineer this. All right, link. Abolishing the Electoral College would exacerbate these divisions. See that? Right now, we're very divided. We're getting more and more divided. And abolishing the Electoral College would only increase those divisions. Okay? You're like, so? Yeah, I hope that's your initial reaction. Is like, so what? I don't care. Let's take a look when we get down to the impacts, right? So the increased polarization and instability resulting from abolishing the Electoral College would make it more difficult for the government to function effectively. This could create a breakdown in essential services, economic downturns, and loss of public trust in the democratic process. I like that one because the loss of public trust in the democratic process actually is what we call a case turn, or actually, at least it is setting up a case turn, right? The whole point of abolishing the Electoral College is so that there is more fairness and trust in the democratic process. And you're like, that might actually turn out to be the opposite. In addition to there's also broader philosophical implications. So the way that ChatGPT treats impacts is it treats them as bigger philosophical things, and I think that's fine. I like doing the really practical, common sense impacts, right? Like the really, really practical ones. The system was put in place by it would be a departure from the original intent, could potentially undermine the legitimacy of government in the eyes of Americans. Okay. So at this point, what I would do is like, I need a little bit more. So explain how this could lead to a loss in the democratic process in more detail. Give examples. All right. See that? Like you just prompted for a little bit more. So don't treat ChatGPT as the final draft. Treat it as the first draft. No! Why would it expire right now? I've just been using it. Come on. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So here, I'm gonna try to get back into this here. Okay. And this is also the problem with using technology. Sometimes it doesn't work. All right. And you can't rely on it. So I would be moving on to. I still don't worry. I don't need this in order to finish up on this prep session. Okay. But if I can, I will. Okay. Um, so loss in the democratic process, right? Think about uh, how okay, very clearly the Electoral College has been favoring conservatives or Republicans more than Democrats, right? When the Electoral College it has gone against the popular vote, in the most recently, it has favored Republicans. George W. Bush, Donald Trump, right? Those are the recent examples. Both of them are Republicans that won the Electoral College votes, even though they lost the popular vote. Okay, so here we go. We're back. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to say explain the internal link in more detail, include examples. Would make it more difficult for the government to function, leading to downturns, loss of public trust. One way that this could happen is by exacerbating the urban-rural divide in American politics. Without the Electoral College, candidates would have less incentive to appeal to rural voters and the concerns of rural states. They could simply focus on winning over populous areas. So I want something that's a little bit more, not so, it's just like over a long period of time, this could happen. The internal link, the best internal links are ones in which you actually pass a threshold, which we call a brink. Okay. And so a brink is like a line that once you pass it, you can't go back. Less responsive. Another potential consequence would be already high levels of polarization. Candidates would have less incentive to appeal to centrist voters and instead focus on energizing their base. Historical examples of what can happen when the government is unable to function effectively due to political polarization. For instance, in 2018 and 19 led to significant disruption in essential services such as airport security, national parks, food and safety inspections. Also had a negative impact on the county economy, with estimates suggesting it lost $11 billion. Okay, I don't think that's anything um, bad to include in your speech, because remember, like the Electoral College, there's it's hard to come up with impacts on how, like, how do you know how much better off we might have been if we did the popular vote rather than the Electoral College, right? It's like, and so you talk about these practical things. What are the practical effects of having a different president in office? Okay, so what I would be going for, I think I want to push it a little bit more about how explain how. Make sure you spell it right. Okay, how conservatives might react to abolishing the Electoral College by restricting access to voting. This entire series is about election reform, and there's a theme where Republican policies are trying to, in general, limit who gets to vote based on voting security and security issues. Right? It's the classic argument of freedom versus security, right? Or Republicans are on the security side this time, and Democrats are on the freedom side, where it's like we want more security in our election system, therefore we need to have more voter ID, things like that. Conservatives may react to abolishing the Electoral College by seeking to restrict voting access to voting. Without the Electoral College, presidential candidates would have less incentive to campaign in rural areas and smaller populations. Yeah, we said that. This would give Democrats an advantage as their support is concentrated in urban areas and coastal states. To counteract this advantage, conservatives may seek to restrict access to voting in urban areas and other democratic strongholds. They may do this by implementing voter ID laws, reducing the number of polling places in urban areas, purging voter rolls, and other measures. That is the level of detail at the on a disadvantage that I would really suggest you going. Your politics disadvantage would be like, all right, we're a divided nation. Abolishing the Electoral College will only further divide us. The people who feel like that they're getting an unfair treatment by abolishing the Electoral College would be conservatives. They would react to that by restricting access in a number of different ways. All right. And so there's, in addition, there's historical precedent for conservatives using voter suppression tactics to maintain their grip on power. Jim Crow is a while ago, but there are some holdovers that you can point out right now. So there you go. All right. Make sure though that you are. See, look, I'm pressing it to give me more like tangible examples because the original up here, the original disadvantage that it gave me up here is so generic and vague that it doesn't have the details that you need. So you have to prompt it for more and more and more detail. All right. So there you go. Good politics disadvantage. We are in a political climate that's highly polarized. You abolish electoral college that pisses off conservatives. That means that they respond, turns your case, right? Your whole point is about increasing fairness in elections. And what you actually do is decrease fairness in elections through these unintended consequences. Got it? Now, last thing I want to talk about in the last maybe 10, 15 minutes, okay? How maybe that's not enough. Maybe because there's some arguments that people can make. It's kind of like, yeah, Republicans are already doing this, right? They're already restricting voting access. They're already doing like voter ID laws, packing the court, all that stuff is already happening. So in debate, we call that non-unique, right? And so why do we need to do we need to be worried about that if it's already happening? Good argument, by the way, a really good argument. It's like it's pure defense, but it's just really good, beautiful defense. Sometimes what you need to have is a little bit of your own offense. Okay, generate a counter plan to abolishing the electoral college. I think I'm just missing the key sometimes. All right. Generate a counter plan. Counter plans help you to get some offense on your own. You get to get some solvency by doing a counter plan. You don't have to just say, no, the Electoral College is perfect the way it is. We must preserve it exactly how it should be. All right. So there's a number of address the faithless elector problem. Okay. So let's go from the bottom up. You only want to address the faithless elector problem if somebody runs the faithless elector argument, okay? And not everybody runs the faithless elector argument. You can just say, yeah, faithless electors should not be a thing. What that means is that in the Electoral College system, people can vote for whoever they want, right? Technically, like some of them are duty bound to vote for whoever the outcome was. Who's it? Trump. Electoral map. Pinto. Yeah, see, take a look at see if there's just a good visual to look at here. There we go. Take a look at this. Take a look. Here we go. In this map, it shows you how the breakdown was. It wasn't just see, look on the electoral votes. That doesn't add up to the number, the total number. There's seven votes went to other candidates. It says see election facts below. If it will let me go, that would be great. Come on. I'm lagging here. I know I'm lagging. Come on. Oh, God, come on. 270 to win. Come on. Jeez. I'm not doing this. I'm just waiting for it to catch up with me, okay? Political issues a day. Only 5 elections where popular vote was defeated. Hillary Clinton. Um, 2016. Okay. So an independent received over 20% of the vote in Utah, which is one of the best 30. Gary Johnson received 3% nationwide. Come on. Jeez. They must have a bunch of ads that are just lagging this down. Okay. Here we go. There were 7 faithless presidential election aside from 1872. Death is greatest number. Aside from 1872, it is the greatest number since electors began casting 1 vote each for president and vice president. Okay. Oh, but they're not saying who they are. Anyways, um, so in this election, there's a lot of people that, at least 7 people in the Electoral College that voted for someone other than Clinton or Trump. All right, they did not like the outcome, and they thought that was, oh, you see, look, like one elector cast a vote for Bernie Sanders. Trump won Texas, but one elector cast a vote for Ron Paul and the other for John Kasich. Okay. Clinton won Washington. However, 3 electors cast votes for Colin Powell and 1 for Faith Spotted Eagle. I don't know who that is, honestly. I saw that before. I still don't know who that necessarily is, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So those are all the what that means is, like, you could just say no, you're not allowed to do that. It's like wherever the vote goes, that's how it should be done. Okay. So let's take a look at the other. That's one, but it doesn't solve all the inequity with the voting, right? It still has like the large state, small state things. You don't solve for that. So that's the important part, is that you have to solve for the problems that the affirmative says are problems. If or you have to say that you have to point out that they're not problems, right? So they say large states have too much power. You're like, that's not true. Small states disproportionately have more power than the large states. So that that's just not true. And then so you don't have to solve for the large state problem. Okay, but increase the number of electors. That's interesting. To address this, we propose increasing the number of electors to ensure smaller states have a greater voice in the election. This could be achieved by increasing the number of electors allocated to smaller. Why only smaller states? Or creating additional electors to represent territories such as Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. Interesting. I don't think conservatives are like that, though. That you still have the politics disadvantage. Here you go. Eliminate the winner-take-all system. Currently, most states award all of their electors to candidates who win the popular vote in the state. This can lead to candidates focusing their attention solely on swing states. This was an argument in the one that we're doing, and ignoring concerns of voters in states that are safely Republican or Democrat. Yeah, I'm in California, and we don't get a whole lot of visits during the presidential elections. We see plenty of commercials, but I don't think we see nearly as much as some other swing states, right? This would ensure candidates must campaign in all states and that every vote counts. So not every vote, right? So take a look at the presidential election map again, if it allows me to, because it's just taken forever. Okay. Um, Here we go. Come on. My goodness. Okay, what I want you to pay attention to is take a look at Maine. Okay. So Maine right now, you see that Maine is blue. If you can't see that, Maine has 4 total electoral votes. 3 of those votes went to Hillary Clinton, the Democrat, and 1 went to Trump. Because what Maine does, and Nebraska, but you can't see it in this one, what Maine does is that Maine has proportional um, allocation of electoral votes. Proportional. That means that, so you have 2 senators, so take those out. That means that there are 2 other House representative votes, right? And so if they had close to a 50-50 point spread, then those then one electoral vote goes to the Republican, one goes to the Democrat, and then whoever won the state, they get the 2 Senate votes. See that? So think like California has 55, right? That means that they have 53 representatives and 2 senators. So let's say that in this breakdown, like 15 of the uh, districts go Republican. All right, I mean, you got the Orange counties and the Bakersfield, the east, border of California has a lot of Republicans. Okay, so that would be, and then 38 would go Democrat, and then plus 2, so that'd be 40 would go for the Democrats, and 15 would go Republican. So wouldn't it be all of those would go one way or the other? You can do that. There's already a model for it. We already have 2 states that do that, Nebraska and Maine. And what you can do in your counter plan is just say we should do the proportional allocation of these votes rather than the winner take all system. What that does is it evens out the the sort of disparity, the proportional like power that places like Wyoming has um, over the larger states. It also means that people are more likely to come out and vote. So it does address the argument about people just feel less inclined to vote if they like in California. If you're Republican, you're like, what's the point? Well, now you're like, well, I can still help some electoral votes this way, and then that would see, and so that's like a middle ground for the thing. And what you're doing or what you're not doing is you're not abolishing the Electoral College. You don't have to do like a constitutional amendment in order to make these changes. These things exist right now without constitutional amendments. So we can do that on a wider scale. And what it does is it increases the equity of the amount of voting, but you can make the argument that it doesn't trigger the politics disadvantage because it's not as extreme as abolishing the Electoral College. And so you're like, okay, what that does, and there's plenty of Republicans like in California that would be like, this is great, and so it won't really trigger that that in and of itself. See what I mean? So you can do that. You can do a counter plan. Now make sure that when you're doing the counter plan, you have to first say, all right, here's my plan. My plan is to do a proportional representation, and here's how it works. You explain how Maine and Nebraska do it and how we're going to implement that across the country. And you say, all right, let me explain how this solves the problems that you outlined in your affirmative. And now you have to go through. And so you say, like, in the one that we've been using is like large states will no longer have this winner take all amount of power. All right. This will increase voter participation because they feel like they can make a difference in their state, even if they are outnumbered. And what is yeah. Oh, it means that rural areas don't get ignored, right? So you still have your that's the disadvantage, but you have to solve for what they're talking about. And so, like, let's say those are your 2 arguments: is like voter turnout and state power, right? It's kind of like, okay, this evens out state power and it actually increases voter turnout. But what it doesn't do, and this is the third part of a counter plan, is it does not trigger the politics disadvantage, because this is a moderate, a sort of centrist, middle of the road approach to modifying the Electoral College, making it a little bit more even. See that? So you could start off with, all right, I'm going to refute 3 arguments on case, and then I'm going to have a politics disadvantage, and here's my counter plan. And that will fill 6 minutes. That will definitely fill 6 minutes in a debate like this. Okay, I definitely recommend that. I like the proportional counter plan in almost all cases. In almost all cases, okay. I think that there are very few situations in which a proportional counter plan would not work. So what? Think about what that does to the debate, right? The debate, therefore, is no longer about keeping the Electoral College or abolishing it. It's about popular vote or proportional vote. It changes the debate, right? And it changes it so you take away some offense from the affirmative, and it kind of helps boost your disadvantage talk and the refutation as well. So I can't recommend that enough. Take a look at that. I would definitely research the proportional counter plan. How does Nebraska and how does Maine do it? What could we expect from these things, and why is it better? Ultimately, you have options when it comes to opposing the abolishment of the Electoral College. You do not have to just say the Electoral College is perfect. Okay, you can offer a counter plan to improve the Electoral College without abolishing it and still preserve your negative ground. All right. Ultimately, if you got any questions or suggestions, put them in the comments. I promise I will get back to them as soon as I can. We will have another prep session shortly on another topic. Okay. All right, everybody. I'll see you later.